What if the deadliest infectious disease in the world wasn't COVID or the flu, but something most Americans barely think about? What if millions still suffer in silence while the cure is already within reach? Today, we're diving into John Greene's gripping new book, Everything is Tuberculosis. And by the end, this story may change how you see health, justice, and your own place in the world. Welcome to BookMind Audio Summaries, the channel where best-selling books come alive for your mind and motivate your life. If you're new here, I'm thrilled to have you join this community of thinkers, readers, and changemakers. In this episode, we'll break down the powerful true stories, urgent wisdom, and human drama behind John Greene's latest nonfiction masterpiece. Get ready for an unforgettable journey into a book that challenges us to care, act, and see beyond the headlines. Imagine a disease that has haunted humanity for centuries, one that stalks the poor, the vulnerable, the forgotten. It is relentless, ancient, and yet stunningly modern. This is tuberculosis, a word that may sound outdated, a threat that rarely makes headlines, but one that still quietly claims more lives than any other infectious disease. Now, imagine picking up John Greene's book, Everything is Tuberculosis. You expect a medical history, maybe a few statistics, perhaps a clinical explanation. Instead, you find a pulse, a beating heart, a set of stories, a call not just for understanding, but for action, for empathy, for justice. You find yourself compelled not by charts, but by people, especially one boy named Henry. The book's radical purpose. From the very first pages, Greene sets out to confront a paradox. Tuberculosis is curable, but humanity, by choice, lets it remain the deadliest infection on Earth. This isn't just about bacteria. It's about economics, stigma, politics, the architecture of who receives care and who is left behind. It's an argument that TB is not only a disease of the lungs, but of society itself. Greene's voice is one of gentle outrage. He says, "How can I accept a world where over 1 million people will die this year for want of a cure that has existed for nearly a century?" Through this question, the book turns away from indifference toward the hard, luminous work of changing it. John Greene, reluctant activist, best known for his novels and for his indelible YouTube presence, John Greene never set out to write about tuberculosis. His journey began with a visit to Sierra Leone with Partners in Health in 2019, a trip that shattered his assumptions about the disease. Tuberculosis isn't a relic of Victorian novels, it's an everyday catastrophe, preventable, treatable, and yet allowed to fester because of human choices. The stories he encountered, the statistics he learned, and the raw inequity of care became a spark. Greene spoke about it at the UN. He rallied fans to pressure corporations for fairer access to drugs like bedaquiline. And then, ultimately, he wrote this book, not merely to inform, but to move the world. The story of Henry. Henry is 17 and, when Greene meets him, living with tuberculosis in a Sierra Leone hospital. But he is more than his diagnosis, a student, a joker, a boy held fiercely in hope by his mother Isatu. Their fight is vivid, tragic, and emblematic. Henry's battle is mirrored in millions of cases across the globe. Henry's story isn't sanitized or made into sentimental tragedy. It is honest about suffering, the brutal drugs, the hunger that comes from finally having an appetite during treatment, the stigma in his community, the terror in his mother's eyes. There are setbacks, times the drugs don't work, moments when hope hangs by a thread. But there is also resilience. Isatu works impossibly long hours to afford medicine. Henry yearns for school, for future, for joy. Greene uses Henry's journey to put a face to numbers, a name to the nameless. The cure is where the disease is not, and the disease is where the cure is not, Greene writes, showing that TB, at its root, is a disease of inequality. The tragedy is not just microbial, it's structural, economic, political. And every single life, like Henry's, matters. Tuberculosis, a disease of choices. Greene explodes the myth of TB as an exotic or ancient problem. Instead, he shows TB flourishes not because we cannot treat it, but because we choose not to, as a global society. Drug-resistant TB emerges where treatment is irregular, often due to poverty, distance, or the cost of the drugs. Pharmaceutical companies and policymakers make decisions every day that draw the line between who lives and who dies. He exposes the shameful irony that much TB research is funded by public money, but the rewards are often privatized. He writes, "I would challenge them to look into Isatu's eyes and tell her that Johnson & Johnson's price gouging has nothing to do with a medicine funded primarily by the public being unavailable to the most vulnerable members of that public." The weight of stigma and the power of story. Stigma haunts TB, seen for centuries as a disease that chosen people catch, a marker of poverty or neglect. Stigma isolates, doubly punishes, makes the sick feel both ill and unworthy of care. Greene goes further, exploring TB as metaphor. How do we talk about illness in literature, in news, in our private fears? How do myths shape reality? Who gets support? Who gets abandoned? And who moves unseen among us, coughing quietly? Through storytelling, Greene breaks that silence. Facts rarely change minds. Stories do. By centering Henry, Isatu, and other real people, Greene beckons the reader, listening, watching, following along this YouTube journey, to care, to imagine, to act. The emotional stakes. This is not a hopeless book, nor a story without progress. Henry survives. He gets treatment. Eventually, he is well enough to return home, to pick up his education, to become a voice for others. His story is not just about endurance, it's about the transformative power of attention and solidarity. But Greene refuses to romanticize single victories. As long as millions languish for lack of medicine or care, the work is not done. The stakes are life and death, dignity and indifference. To read, to listen, to share is itself a step toward visibility and change. Stories that change everything. The weight and wisdom of tuberculosis. In the heart of every societal crisis lies a story, one that can reshape our understanding of the world and our place in it. John Greene's Everything is Tuberculosis unspools such stories, binding together science, sorrow, hope, and fierce advocacy. As we journey past Henry's urgent hospital bed, the book plunges into the history, metaphor, and stigma of tuberculosis, and the lessons it holds for us now. A plague in the shadows, history's haunting. Tuberculosis has haunted humanity for centuries. Long before it even had a name, it appeared in bones from Egyptian mummies, danced on the edge of 19th century poetry, and instilled both fascination and terror. Dubbed consumption, it seemed strangely beautiful to some, its victims characterized by pale skin and fever-bright eyes. The Romantic era immortalized TB in art and literature. Yet behind the mystique was relentless pain, loss, and grinding poverty. Families watched loved ones waste away, medical progress inching along while the poor bore the heaviest cost. Greene probes these murky waters, exposing how old myths linger. Even as antibiotics changed everything in the 20th century, Society's tendency to blame, shame, and ignore those afflicted persisted. It's a pattern. When the rich and famous fall, the world rallies. When the poor and voiceless get sick, silence falls. Stigma and silence, a modern epidemic. TB's greatest weapon, even today, is not its bacteria. It's the cloud of stigma and neglect that allows it to thrive. Ignorance and fear means TB patients are often shunned, fired, or blamed for their suffering. These wounds, layered atop the physical ones, are harder to treat. Greene shares a story from Mumbai. An aspiring teacher, Asha, shunned by her in-laws after her diagnosis, withdrew from life and stopped treatment. This downward spiral, caused more by shame than disease, nearly cost her life until neighbors formed a support circle, helping her finish her medication and reclaim her career dreams. Stories like Asha's are repeated worldwide, underlining Greene's call. Breaking TB's hold means breaking the silence. It begins with talking, honestly, publicly, and with compassion. Science versus inequality. Greene excels at bridging science and humanity. He deftly explains how TB works, a bacterium that can lie dormant for years, waiting for the body's defenses to drop. Treatment is arduous, even in the best hospitals, requiring strict drug regimens that last for months, sometimes years. But the real obstacles aren't scientific, they are social and political. Patients stop taking drugs because they can't afford to miss work. Families lack food or transportation, undermining the best therapies. Pharmaceutical companies, urged by profit, keep new medications priced beyond the poor's reach. Greene's outrage is palpable. The science is solved, the systems are broken. Key activists, doctors, and ordinary people, many once considered hopeless cases, show how local advocacy, community health workers, and global campaigns can work miracles, but only when the world pays attention. The metaphors we carry. Illness isn't just about the body. It's about the stories society tells about sickness, who deserves care and who should be blamed. Greene devotes powerful chapters to how TB is used as a metaphor for poverty, for shame, for weakness, myths that do real harm by isolating the sick and justifying neglect. Drawing on Susan Sontag's work, Greene asks, what if we changed the metaphors? What if being sick didn't equal being unclean, doomed, or less than, but instead deserving of radical empathy and support? Hope isn't optional. Despite its heavy themes, Everything is Tuberculosis insists on hope. Hope as both a survival tool and a revolutionary act. Greene recounts the story of a Zulu grandmother, Nomsa, who started a peer counseling group for women battling not only TB, but also HIV and hunger. In her living room, hope is made practical. It's found in sharing food, tracking treatment schedules, and refusing to let anyone fall out of care. Nomsa's work is a blueprint for action. The small, constant efforts of community can move mountains where big systems fail. Greene uplifts these stories, reminding us that true power lies in networks of care and the relentless refusal to give up. The fight for access. A central crusade of Greene's, both in and outside the book, is the battle for drug access. He traces the journey of the bedaquiline patent, a life-saving medication sequestered by price and patent law. Fans of his YouTube channel will remember the moment Greene called out Johnson & Johnson, rallying thousands to petition for fairer access. The pressure worked. Drug prices shifted, barriers fell for the world's most impoverished patients. But Greene wants readers and listeners to remember, every painful negotiation, every victory is fragile. Lives hang in balance, and the scales too often tip for profit. not people. He urges ongoing vigilance, activism, and an uncompromising demand for justice. Why stories change everything? Statistics are cold, stories kindle fire. That is the spirit of Greene's approach. His own vulnerability as a person with anxiety and lifelong chronic illness forged connections beyond mere sympathy. I do not know if telling stories saves lives, but it saves me, and it might move the world one beating heart at a time. A world without tuberculosis. The fight, the movement, the hope. The story of tuberculosis is not just a tragedy, it's a challenge and an invitation. In this final segment, John Greene's Everything is Tuberculosis swells into a rallying cry, weaving personal stories and public action into a movement that can and must change the world. Ordinary heroes, unseen work. Greene makes it clear. The global fight against TB is not won by governments alone, but by ordinary heroes. Community health workers walk for miles, often unpaid, to deliver pills and encouragement. Teachers learn to recognize coughs and stigma in their classrooms. Families advocate, in villages and city halls, for resources, the lifelines to treatment and hope. In Peru, Maria, once cured, now trains rural women as cough monitors, transforming survivors into sentinels for their neighbors. In Kazakhstan, a group of teenagers in recovery hosts a weekly radio show, busting myths and teaching about tuberculosis in 2 languages. Greene holds up these examples not as isolated miracles, but as threads in a global tapestry of resilience. The power of community. Every advance against TB is a story of people coming together. John Greene profiles the work of Partners in Health, organizations like Treatment Action Group, and everyday activists who refuse to let anyone slip through the cracks. Their lesson? Systems change when community demands it. Greene describes advocacy campaigns that forced reductions in the price of drugs, expanded access to mobile clinics, and pressured the world's richest countries to fund childhood TB research for the first time in decades. The message is straightforward. Human connection is stronger than bacteria. Solidarity, not just science, saves lives. Systemic change, what it takes. Yet Greene is honest about the skill and difficulty of the task. TB disproportionately affects the most vulnerable because the world is built to leave them behind. To end TB, the movement must also tackle poverty and poor housing, reform patent and drug pricing laws, demand equitable healthcare as a human right. Greene urges listeners not just to donate or learn, but to vote, protest, and speak out. We must change the story the world tells about who is worth saving, he insists, reminding us that real movement requires shifting hearts and structures together. John Greene's Everything is Tuberculosis isn't just a book. It's a wake-up call to empathy, action, and real-world change. Through Henry, Isatu, and countless other stories, we've learned how the fight against TB is about more than medicine. It's about who we choose to help, what we're willing to speak for, and how ordinary heroes shape history. If these stories moved you, remember that awareness is the beginning of transformation for ourselves and the world. If this summary sparked your curiosity or stirred your heart, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button, subscribe to BookMind audio summaries, and join a community dedicated to exploring life-changing books together. Share your thoughts or questions in the comments. How did this story impact you? And if you know someone who needs to hear these stories, send this video their way. Together, we create change by sharing knowledge. Thanks for listening to BookMind Audio Summaries. Remember, every great book holds the power to shape minds, and every listener is part of that journey. Stay curious, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep making a difference, one story at a time.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.